Chapter 1909. In addition, divide everyone into 3 teams. One team will attack with me, one team will plunder the treasures, and one team will keep an eye on the entire Endless Treasures Pavilion. Don't let anyone escape. Once we're done, we'll meet at the courtyard in the western part of the city. Fengjiu said in a deep voice. Yes. Everyone replied and divided the teams into 3 teams. After assigning their respective roles, they waited for tonight's orders. As the night deepened, the people on the streets gradually became sparse. In the darkness of the night, black figures flitted across the rooftops and headed towards the Endless Treasures Pavilion. Of the 100 people, a small team was left to guard the corners outside. Another team of 2 followed Fengjiu in as the main force, while the remaining team headed towards the treasury of the Endless Treasures Pavilion. The night was tranquil, and nearly 100 fairy realm cultivators had surrounded the Endless Treasures Pavilion without making a sound. However, the people inside hadn't noticed anything amiss. As the main force, after Fengjiu and the others sneaked into the Endless Treasures Pavilion, 2 or 3 of them stayed behind to deal with the people below, while the rest went upstairs. One of the guards of the Endless Treasures Pavilion had his throat slit and fell to the ground. At the same time, the other few people also took care of the guards on the first floor. After taking care of more than 20 guards in the front and back of the pavilion, the rest went up to the second floor. Perhaps it was because of the faint smell of blood in the air, but the people on the second floor sensed that something was amiss. 2 of the fairy realm cultivators came out to take a look, and they just happened to see a guard being killed and dragged to the front. They couldn't help but shout out. "Who is it?" As soon as the voice that contained a powerful pressure was heard, all the cultivators hidden in the Endless Treasures Pavilion rushed out. At this time, Fengjiu and the others also appeared one after another. When the old man in the Endless Treasures Pavilion saw the green-robed youth walk out from the darkness, he could not help but be startled and exclaim, "It's you? Why are you here? Wasn't this youth sent to the training camp at that time? Why was he here? How could anyone who entered that place ever come out?" Fengjiu's lips curled up slightly as he looked at the old man, his eyes narrowed into slits as he said, "I didn't expect you to still remember me. What an honor." She waved her hand and said to the people behind her, "Move quickly." "Yes." Everyone responded and quickly rushed forward to attack the people from the Endless Treasures Pavilion. When the old man saw that all of the black-robed men were at the fairy realm, his expression changed. Damn it. He didn't want to fight, but wanted to quickly escape from here. He turned around and wanted to escape from the back, but he didn't expect to see those men in black standing guard behind him. "Today, none of you will be able to escape." Fengjiu narrowed his eyes as he spoke. He didn't make a move. Instead, he leaned against the pillar and looked at the panicking people. "What's going on? What happened?" A few old men hurried down from the 3rd floor. One of them was Elder Feng from before. "What happened? You have the nerve to ask." The old man with a gloomy gaze stared at Elder Feng. He pointed at the green-robed youth and said angrily, "Didn't you say that this person wouldn't cause any trouble? Look, look." Chapter 1910. Elder Feng looked at the green-robed young man and was shocked. The green-robed young man, who was leaning against the pillar with his arms crossed, was he not the young man who was picking herbs? Back then, Elder Tan had said that the young man was his distant nephew. How could they not know that was just an excuse? At that time, he had taken a fancy to the young man's indescribable aura. He felt that if the young man was trained by the people inside, he would definitely be extraordinary. At that time, he might even be of help to them. Furthermore, it had been a few months since they had entered, and there had been no news of anything happening. Now that the young man had appeared in the treasure trove building with his people, how could he not be in big trouble? When he thought of the possible disaster that this could cause, his face turned pale, and his body trembled slightly. When he looked around and saw that the black-robed men surrounding them were all cultivators at the fairy realm, he screamed in his heart, "It's over, it's over, it's over, something has really happened." There were more than 20 cultivators of the fairy realm surrounding them, and they only had a few cultivators of the fairy realm on their side. When they saw that the situation was not right, their first thought was to escape. However, when they fled to the back, they saw that there were also many cultivators of the fairy realm guarding them. There was nowhere for them to run. What do you want?" Elder Fong and the others shouted angrily, glaring fiercely at the green-robed young man who was walking slowly towards them. "Of course, I want to return the favor. You've given me such a big gift, how can I not return the favor?" Fingzhou chuckled and looked at them, saying, "Oh, right, you must not know. The headquarters of the Temple of the Dark Knight has been destroyed by us. It looks like you haven't received the news yet. Well, if you had received the news, why would you still be here and not leave without taking any precautions?" When the old men heard this, they widened their eyes in disbelief. What did you say? What do you mean by that? You destroyed the headquarters of the Temple of the Dark Knight. How is that possible? That was simply impossible. There were so many strong cultivators guarding the headquarters. How could it be destroyed so easily? Furthermore, they had not received any news at all. This could not be true. However, although they thought this, another thought surfaced in their minds. If it wasn't true, how could the green-robed young man escape? If it wasn't true, why would they dare to attack the treasure trove building like this? Hiss. Ah! Just as they were in shock, one of the cultivators of the fairy realm was surrounded by them. His arm was cut, and fresh blood. And they. Chapter 1911. Just as Fingzhou finished speaking, Lei Xiao and the rest instantly attacked. More than 10 people surrounded those people and began to fight. The pressure of the fairy realm experts and the airflow flowed in the endless treasures building, faintly forming an air pressure that could be seen with the naked eye. Bang! Whoosh! Ah! The sound of battle rang out. The sound of collision, the sound of fierce airflow, and miserable shrieks spread out in the night sky, alarming the people in the city. After some of the people from the influential families in the city were startled awake, they sent people to investigate. When they received news that the Endless Treasures building had been surrounded by a group of experts and that outsiders could not get close, they could not help but be shocked. Who dared to attack the Endless Treasures building? The power behind them was, while feeling shocked, they paid close attention, but did not dare to get too close. They listened to the sounds of battle from a distance, and the more they heard, the more shocked they became. What kind of power dared to compete with the Endless Treasures building? Were they planning to destroy the Endless Treasures building in one night? They watched in bewilderment until they saw that the Endless Treasures building had been set ablaze after midnight. Only then did they suddenly come to their senses. However, when they looked at the Endless Treasures building's main door, they did not see anyone coming out from inside. However, they could hear that the commotion had gradually died down after the fire had started. This fire burned for an entire night, burning the entire Endless Treasures building to ashes before it was extinguished. In the small courtyard in the northern part of the city, Lei Xiao and the rest had already changed out of their black robes and into ordinary clothes. Although at first glance, they did not look as ferocious as before, the fierce and unyielding aura on their bodies could not be missing. The group stood side by side, respectfully standing in front of Fingzhou. Looking at the young man in green robes in front of them, their hearts were filled with an indescribable pride. This person was their leader. He was so powerful, so unfathomable. In their hearts, he was so omnipotent. His image was so lofty that no one could compare to him. After living for so long, this was the first person that they admired and submitted to from the bottom of their hearts. Fengjiu looked at the people who were ready and stood up straight. He couldn't help but reveal a smile. Although we have only been together for a few months, we can also be said to be brothers who have experienced life and death together. Since you are all following me, then I will tell you about my identity. Hearing this, everyone was stunned. Then, they rejoiced and anticipation filled their eyes. One of them could not help but ask curiously, "Captain, are you a disciple of a hidden clan?" "Captain, you're not the son of some sex patriarch, are you?" "Captain, don't tell me you've regained your youth." Captain. One by one, they asked curiously, unable to suppress their curiosity. Pairs of eyes looked at the smiling young man in green, guessing in their hearts, what was the identity of their captain. Fengjiu listened to their words and could not help but chuckle. "All right, don't make wild guesses." He waved his hand and touched his face. "Wait for me." Then, he turned around and entered the room. Seeing their captain enter the room and close the door, the group could not help but discuss. "Who do you think our captain is? Why does he look so mysterious?" Chapter 19:12. Lei Xiao glanced at the crowd and they all grinned. One of them replied, "That's true. No matter what, he's still our leader. But to be honest, we're really curious about our leader's identity." "Aren't you curious?" that person asked and glanced at Lei Xiao with a smile. Lei Xiao coughed and said with a straight face, "What's there to be curious about? Didn't our leader ask us to wait? We'll find out soon. What's there to be curious about?" Hearing this, a smile appeared on number one's cold face. Just as he was about to say something, someone beside him exclaimed, "Look! Our leader is out." How did he change? Our leader looks even more handsome than before. "I know, our leader has been in disguise all this time. But what kind of disguise is this? Those people can't even tell. Even if our leader didn't say so, we still couldn't tell that he was in disguise. But you don't say, our leader's face is really handsome. I reckon he'll definitely charm a bunch of young girls." "Ha ha ha, you can just say that if our leader is a woman, he'll definitely be a devastatingly beautiful woman." "That's enough. How can you say that? Comparing our leader to a woman. Are you itching for a beating? Be careful, our leader will scold you." Hee, I'm just saying it casually. Besides, how can our leader be a woman? What kind of woman is so perverted and powerful? Don't you think so?" That's right, that's right. Everyone saw that their leader was already in front of them and quickly expressed their opinions. The bearded man even grinned and said loudly, "How can our leader be a woman? Tell me, which woman in this world is as powerful as our leader? Look at our leader, he doesn't look like a woman at all. He's just a handsome young man with a graceful demeanor. Don't you think so?" That's right, that's right. Everyone quickly agreed. However, when they saw their leader raising his eyebrows and crossing his arms over his chest and looking at them with a faint smile, they couldn't help but have goosebumps. Why was their leader's smile so dangerous? Seeing this, their hearts were in a mess. Could it be that they had said something wrong? Although the bearded man was thick-skinned, he still felt his hair stand on end when he saw the smile on his captain's lips. He couldn't help but rub his head and smile sheepishly as he said, "Captain, don't be angry. We're just joking. Really, you're just a little better looking and more handsome. You really don't look like a woman at all." "Really? Oh. Is that so? Don't I look like a woman?" Fengjiu glanced at him coldly, his eyes still smiling. Although he was smiling, the bearded man couldn't bring himself to smile. He immediately pulled a long face and said, if anyone dares to say that Captain looks like a woman, I'll get angry with them. We're all men, and we've slept on the same bed. You've even seen me running around naked. How could it be a woman? Fingjo chuckled. That chuckle made the bearded man's hair stand on end. Why did he feel that something was wrong? What exactly went wrong? He scratched his head, but couldn't figure it out. Chapter 1913. What a coincidence. I am a woman. Everyone's expression turned strange when they heard this. Did they hear wrongly? The captain said that he was a woman. Everyone couldn't react for a while. Their eyes kept looking at him from left to right, up and down. Other than the captain's face being a little too handsome and his figure being a little weaker than theirs, he didn't look like a woman at all. Captain, you're joking, right? The bearded man said embarrassedly. At this moment, he did not believe that the captain was telling the truth. He simply thought that he was joking. This was clearly a young man. How did he look like a woman? Do I look like I'm joking? Fingjo glanced at him and said with a faint smile, "Didn't I tell you to pay attention to your image and not take off your clothes?" What? You've forgotten so quickly. So, Captain, you are really a woman. When he heard this and recalled the scene, his face gradually turned from red to white, then from white to red. He stuttered as he spoke. He was so embarrassed that he could not lift his head. He lowered his head and did not dare to lift it up. It was as if he wanted to find a hole in the ground to hide in. He was too ashamed to face anyone. When the others saw this, they all widened their eyes in astonishment. They looked at the young man in green with dumbfounded expressions. He was really a woman. This young man with a noble aura from head to toe. They had thought that he was a young master from some aristocratic family. But now, he said that he was a woman. She really didn't have the slightest bit of a woman's demeanor and appearance. Which woman would have such an unbridled and confident expression between her brows? What kind of woman would have a noble aura and also a faint demonic aura? Captain, you're really a woman. One of them could not help but ask. He felt that his mind was in a mess. Since when were the women in this world so abnormal? When the crowd heard that question, they all held their breaths and looked at the figure in green. They pressed one hand to their chest and felt the sound of their hearts beating. Each beat was stronger than the last, as if it was about to explode. This is too unbelievable. How could a woman endure the same hardships as them? How could she endure the same hardships as them? Why would he not care about anything, sneak into the training camp, and sleep on the same bed as them? Thoughts and questions surfaced in their minds. Even though they heard the captain say it himself, they still did not dare to believe that it was true. As for the bearded man, his face had already turned red. He lowered his head and shrank to the back. Fingjo looked at the crowd and smiled. "That's right, I am a woman. All right, let's put this matter to rest. Let's talk business." She looked at the crowd as she spoke. Her gaze swept past each and every one of them. Only then did her cold voice come out of her mouth. "I have a force under me called the Heavenly Yuan Palace. Here, I have 8 Phoenix Guards who will follow me through life and death. From this moment onwards, all of you will belong to the Heavenly Yuan Palace. However, I do not plan on letting you show yourselves. Instead, I hope that all of you will hide yourselves and return to cultivate. In the future, when I have orders for you or when I ask you to show yourselves, you can show yourselves." Chapter 1914. Hearing this, everyone looked at each other as if they had something to ask. After a slight pause, Lei Xiao asked, "Captain, from today onwards, are we also members of the Phoenix Guard?" Feng Jiu glanced at them and took out Phoenix Guard tokens from the space and handed them over. At the same time, she said, when I don't need you, you can go back to your previous lives. You can also find a place to cultivate. You can also become mercenaries. You can also help the Tianyuan Palace recruit more cultivators. However, there is one last thing you have to remember. Tianyuan Palace isn't a place that anyone can enter, and not just anyone can become my subordinate. Treacherous people, ruthless people without a bottom line, evil people, rapists, and rapists are not accepted. She spoke word by word and her voice slowly entered everyone's ears. At the same time, when you go out, you have to always remember my rules. You can't bully the weak with your own strength, and you can't use Tianyuan Palace's name to cause trouble outside. If you encounter something you can't solve, you can ask for help from the forces under Tianyuan Palace. I will tell you the markings later. When everyone heard this, they held the Phoenix Guards in their hands and solemnly and powerfully replied, yes. Captain, rest assured. Next, Fengjiu told them some of the markings of Tianyuan Palace. At the same time, she also told them to pass on messages and some things that they needed to do in the future. Finally, she let everyone leave. What are you still standing here for? Fengjiu glanced at the man with a bitter face. Although he originally had a beard, he was much more handsome after shaving. Captain, you saw me naked. Tell me, how am I going to get a wife in the future? He stood there with a red face. Everyone else had left, but he was still standing there. Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled, is that so? Then do I need to take responsibility? As she spoke, she took out 3 silver needles. As long as I prick you a few times, you won't need to get a wife in the future. At that time, I will naturally take responsibility for you until the end. Ah. Prick me a few times. Captain will take responsibility for me until the end. He was stunned and asked with a puzzled expression, why did the captain put me in charge after a few stabs? Fengjiu smiled maliciously. He played with the silver needles in his hand and said slowly, you can't get it up, so you can't get a wife. Since you can't get a wife, I will take responsibility for you until the end. Hearing this, he shuddered. His whole body tensed up and he quickly took a few steps back. No, I was just kidding. Captain, I'll go first. As soon as he finished speaking, he tensed up his body and quickly left. Looking at his sorry figure, it felt like he was fleeing. Fengjiu snorted as he looked at the figure that flew out of the room. He put away the silver needles and flicked his robe. It had been a while since they left. Thinking about it, Du Fan and the others should have established a firm foothold here. The only question was how their forces were developing. Now that the matter was settled, it was a good time to go back and take a look. Calculating the time, perhaps Sei should also be here. Chapter 1915. Outside the town where the Nalan family was located, nearly 100 people from both families were quarreling. Didn't you say that you were going to pick up the bride today? Look at what's happening now. Where's the groom? The groom ran away and you sent this person to pick up the bride. Does your young family really think that just anyone can marry into our Yuan family? If you don't give us an explanation today, I won't let this matter rest. A middle-aged man who was the leader said angrily. A good marriage was ruined just like that, and they even dared to send someone who wasn't presentable to fool them. They were too hateful. Brother Yang, don't be angry. Let's talk about this properly. The patriarch of the Ruan clan wiped his sweat, his face full of shame. I really didn't know that my unfilial son actually ran away from the marriage and even called a branch relative of the clan to come and fetch the bride. This matter is my fault, I apologize to you here. The Ruan family head said apologetically and bowed to the person in front of him. Brother Yang, you see, this matter can't be discussed here. There are a lot of people coming and going outside the city. It's not good for the second young lady's reputation. Don't you think so? Let's go back to the house and talk about it. Humph. Now you want to talk about it. Your one family is too much of a bully. Just as they were talking, they suddenly heard a scream. When they heard that the scream came from above, everyone instinctively looked up. Ah! Fengjiu exclaimed. She lost her balance and fell from the sky. Before she could stabilize her body, she fell into the sedan chair. Bang! After the heavy crash, 2 muffled groans could be heard. Everyone looked at the sedan chair that was directly smashed and was stunned. It took a while for them to recover. Waiter! Father Yang suddenly came back to his senses and cried out in alarm. He quickly squeezed through the crowd and ran towards the sedan. When he lifted the lid of the sedan and saw the scene inside, he was completely stunned. Not to mention the people outside, even Fengjiu, who fell from above and directly fell onto the girl, was stunned. She looked at the girl in front of her who was wearing a wedding dress. Yes, although she was wearing a wedding dress, she could only be called a girl and not a woman. The girl was wearing a bright red wedding dress. Her chubby round face had a pair of big round eyes. Under her small nose was a bright red mouth. However, her mouth was slightly open and she was eating a mouthful of pastries. Even when she suddenly fell down, the girl didn't show any fear on her face. There was only curiosity and a kind of surprise that she couldn't figure out. What made her even more astonished was that this chubby girl suddenly threw away the pastry in her hand and actually reached out to hug her tightly. She even shouted words that made her extremely speechless. Father! Father! I want him. I want this little brother. I don't want that pretty boy from the Ruan family anymore. I want him, I want him. The girl's crisp words came out of her mouth. Perhaps it was because she was plump and strong, but with this hug, Fengjiu's entire body was pressed against the girl's plump and soft breasts, causing her face to flush red. Chapter 1916. Little brother, you're so good-looking. Be my groom. The fat girl's round eyes narrowed into crescent moons as her rosy round face was filled with joy. No way. Fengjiu directly rejected. All right. That'll do. The fat girl acted coquettishly as she hugged Fengjiu tightly with both hands. Her smiling eyes looked at the person in front of her. Phew. Fengjiu gasped for breath and shouted, quickly let go. You're about to strangle me to death. She stretched out both hands and grabbed the girl's hands to pull them apart. The fat girl blinked her round eyes as she looked at Fengjiu in surprise and joy. Little brother, you're so awesome. You can actually pull my hands apart. She was very strong and those who were hugged by her would usually not be able to leave. She didn't expect him to be so strong that he was able to pull her hands apart with just a pull. The corner of Fengjiu's mouth twitched as she shot a glance at the fat girl and thought to herself, this girl's strength is not ordinary. Her strength is even stronger than those who cultivate profound energy. If it wasn't for her cultivation, how would she be able to pull her hands apart? Just as she was about to turn around and leave the sedan, her thigh was suddenly hugged. She couldn't help but stiffen as she turned around to glare at the fat girl in anger. Let go. Little brother, where are you going? Bring me along. The fat girl smiled fawningly as she hugged Fengjiu's thigh and refused to let go. Fengjiu's forehead was filled with black lines as she didn't speak to the girl anymore. Instead, she turned around to look at the middle-aged man standing outside the sedan. This is your daughter. Yes, yes. Family head Yang met the youth's serene gaze and couldn't help but nod. Since she's your daughter, why aren't you pulling her away? It wasn't that she didn't have a way to leave, but if she forcefully shook her off, she would probably hurt this fat girl. Family head Yang looked at Fengzhou and didn't know why he was somewhat fearful of this youth. He hurriedly shouted to his daughter, "Xiao, quickly let go of this gentleman. You can't hug him like this. Quickly let go." "Waiter." Fengzhou's mouth twitched. He glanced at the chubby girl. "What a unique nickname. Little brother, where is your home? What's your name? How old are you?" The chubby girl let go of Fengzhou's thigh and hugged her hand instead. Who knew that she would be flung away before she could hold her hand properly? "Little brother." She stared blankly for a moment, blinking her eyes at the young man who had run out of the palanquin. She watched as the young man squeezed into the crowd outside and was about to disappear from her sight. She could not help but flatten her lips and her eyes filled with tears. Soon after, large teardrops the size of beads fell from her eyes. Sob. "Daddy, little big brother ran away, he ran away, quickly catch him for me, I want little big brother, I want him." The chubby girl cried as she rubbed her eyes that were dripping with tears, ruining the bridal makeup on her face. At a glance, she looked like a big dirty cat. Especially when the chubby girl crawled out of the palanquin, her plump figure that was one size larger than a normal girl's made everyone in the Ruan family take a few steps back. Seeing the second young lady's figure and appearance, family head Ruan's expression changed slightly. At this moment, he finally understood why his son wanted to run away from the marriage. If it was any normal man, he probably wouldn't fancy such an oversized girl. Chapter 1917. He looked at his daughter with heartache. Seeing her crying face, he hurriedly comforted her, "Don't cry. Father will help you catch him. If you like, we can take him in as a son-in-law." As he spoke, he didn't forget to shout to the Yang family, quickly catch that young master." As he finished speaking, he pulled his daughter and chased after him. The Ruan family was dumbfounded. The Ruan family head suddenly came back to his senses and hurriedly shouted, "Brother Yang! Brother Yang! The marriage between our two families. Catch that young master for me. The marriage between our two families will be cancelled. I won't pursue the matter of the groom running away from today's wedding." The Yang family head's words came from afar. The Ruan family head's face lit up when he heard it. He immediately shouted excitedly to the Ruan family, Quickly catch him. What are you all standing there for? Catch that young man and send him to the Yang family." "Yes." Everyone came back to their senses and responded. They quickly chased after him. "Don't run. Stop. Don't run. Catch him. Don't run." In an instant, the people from the two families chased after the young man in green at the front. In an instant, the commotion caused by them alarmed the people from the other powers in the city. As for Fengzhou, seeing the large group of people chasing after him, he couldn't help but curse in a low voice. He quickly dashed into the alley and entered the space. Who? Why are the people here so bold? They can even directly snatch someone they like. Fengzhou lightly exhaled and shook his head. He muttered, "It's fine if that girl doesn't know her limits, but how can the people from the two families be so reckless? They're really reckless." In the space, a few contracted beasts saw that she was chased into the space and happily surrounded her. Master, master. Especially the little white tiger. In just a few months, it had grown into a tiger's head and was chubby. All right. Move aside. I'll change my appearance and then go out." She waved her hand and said. She sat in the space and thought for a while. Then, she took out a lot of things and prepared to change her appearance. Outside, because the two families were searching everywhere in the city, many people were alarmed. Some of the families sent people out to inquire, but when they heard that it was the young family patriarch who spoiled his fat daughter to the point of being out of control, all the patriarchs could only shake their heads and sigh. In the Nayland family, the Nayland family head listened to his youngest son talk about what happened in the city. He shook his head and smiled. The Young family and the Rowan family originally had an engagement, but the Rowan family's son ran away from the marriage. Now, the Young family's second daughter took a fancy to a young man on the way. They actually caused such a big commotion. As he said this, the Nayland family's head seemed to have thought of something. He looked at his youngest son, frowned, and asked, "Your eldest brother didn't go out these 2 days?" The man wearing embroidered clothes next to him shook his head, "No. Since the day he came back, he's been in the courtyard. He also ordered that no one is to disturb him. Yesterday, little sister wanted to go in and take a look, but she accidentally triggered a mechanism. Fortunately, Big Brother sent her out, so she's fine." Hearing this, the Nayland family head slightly frowned. "I saw that he didn't look very good when he came back that day. I asked him what happened, but he didn't say. I don't know what happened." Hearing this, the man in embroidered clothes' eyes flashed. "Father, son heard a piece of news, but I don't know if it's true or false." Chapter 1918. The brocade-clothed man, Nayland Zian, paused for a moment. He glanced at his father and said, "I heard that a few days ago, Big Brother was seen coming out of a brothel." As soon as his voice fell, he hurriedly said, "Maybe that person saw wrongly. After all, how could a person like Big Brother go to a brothel?" Hearing this, Nayland family head was startled. "Brothel? How is that possible? Mo Chin would never go to a brothel." Nayland family head waved his hand and said, "Even if he went to a brothel, he probably had something to deal with. Putting aside our Nayland family, just based on his identity as Tianji Elder's disciple, there are many people who want to marry their daughters to our family. Yes, that's why I sent people to investigate. I heard that it was someone who sent him there. At that time, Big Brother was so drunk that he was unconscious." Speaking up to here, his voice gradually became softer. When he thought that his big brother might have been drunk and sent to a brothel, he was full of admiration for that person. His big brother, a banished immortal who didn't touch the mortal world, actually had a day when he fell for someone else's trick. It was really inconceivable. The Nayland clan's master was stunned for a long time. Then, he instinctively asked with a bit of curiosity, "Who has such great ability? How could he get him drunk? And to send him to a brothel? Then he wasn't." Cough. He clenched his fist and coughed lightly. He didn't say anything else. Nayland Zian smiled brightly. "I heard that he was only touched up and down. Because that person specifically told me not to. Big Brother woke up when he was halfway through taking off his clothes." Cough cough. The Nayland family's patriarch couldn't help but reveal a smile. He tried his best to keep a straight face as he said, "It's good that he's fine. I thought that something happened to him in the past 2 days. So it's because of this. All right, tell everyone not to disturb him. Let him have some peace and quiet." "Okay." Nayland Zian smiled. After bowing, he left. On the other side, because the two families were looking for a handsome young man in green clothes, once the news spread, not only did Xianyuanmos know, but even Lang Hua and Du Fan knew. Almost as soon as they heard the news, they came out to look for her, thinking that no matter what, they would meet her on the street, right? However, they didn't expect that Feng Jiu would come out again after changing clothes in the space. She was dressed in an inconspicuous gray robe and had a hunched back. Her hair was white and her face was full of wrinkles. She was holding a 1-meter-long bamboo stick in her hand. At first glance, she looked like a very ordinary old woman. In addition, she had one hand behind her back and the other holding a walking stick as she walked slowly. That appearance, that posture, that expression, no one would suspect that she was in disguise. Fengjiu narrowed her eyes and walked unhurriedly. She originally wanted to disguise herself casually, but after thinking about it, she disguised herself as an old woman. She believed that even if Lang Hua and the others passed by her, they wouldn't recognize her. Thinking of this, she smiled happily. The people of the two families were looking for her everywhere. With such a big movement, Lang Hua and the others must have received the news. Chapter 1919. She walked on the street with her walking stick. When she saw the hawkers shouting that they were selling sugar-fried chestnuts, she slowly walked up to them. She stared at the chestnuts and smelled the fragrance. She didn't want to leave. "Elder, do you want to eat chestnuts? They're fresh out of the oven, still piping hot, fragrant, and sweet." The hawker shook the chestnuts in the wok while greeting her with a smile. "Give me a portion of sugar-fried chestnuts." While speaking, Fengjiu took out a piece of silver from her sleeve and handed it to the hawker. When the peddler heard the clear voice of a young man and looked at the old woman whose face was full of wrinkles, he couldn't help but be stunned. He stared at her and sized her up as he took out a bag full of chestnuts and handed it over. "Here, these are your chestnuts." Cough. "Many thanks." Fengjiu lightly coughed. Her voice changed and became old and hoarse. After she took the bag of chestnuts, she walked step by step as if she didn't see the dumbfounded gaze of the hawker behind her. She peeled the chestnuts and ate them as she walked. She put the peeled husks back into the bag and looked at some people walking quickly on the street, looking around and asking questions. She couldn't help but narrow her eyes and reveal a smile. This feeling of watching them looking for someone but not being able to find her, why was it so fun? After walking around the street, she was a bit thirsty because of the chestnuts, so she walked to a tea stall at the corner of the street and sat down. "Tea stall owner, give me a cup of tea to drink." She smiled with her eyes squinted and used her old and hoarse voice to wave and shout. "Okay, elder, please sit for a moment. I'll immediately come over and pour some for you." The busy middle-aged man smiled and responded. After helping the customers at the other tables with tea, he came in front of Fengjiu. "Elder, what kind of tea would you like to drink? We have chrysanthemum tea here that can clear heat and detoxify. We also have new tea from the Tea Mountain family, fried tea, and some flower tea. Other than tea, we also have some mung bean soup. Just give me a cup of fried tea." As Fengjiu spoke, he poured the bag of chestnuts onto the table, peeled them, and put them back into the bag. Sitting at the tea stall, they drank tea and ate chestnuts. From time to time, they would listen to the hawkers on the street and watch the people coming and going on the street. The downtown area was bustling, but this small tea stall seemed leisurely and comfortable. However, at this moment, a surprised voice suddenly sounded. "Little brother." Fengjiu, who was drinking tea, froze when he heard the voice. He turned around instinctively. Then, she saw the fat girl running towards her. Just as she was thinking in astonishment that the fat girl could still recognize her despite her disguise, she saw the fat girl run past her. Like a wisp of smoke, the fat girl ran to the tea table in front of her and grabbed the man in green who was talking to his friend at the tea table. "Little brother." The corners of Fengjiu's mouth twitched, and he lowered his gaze. It turned out that he had mistaken her for someone else. She knew it. How could he possibly recognize her? "What little brother? Go away, go away." The man in green was delighted when he turned around, thinking that it was a delicate beauty. Who knew that it was a heavyweight beauty? He couldn't help but show disgust on his face and pushed her away. Chapter 1920. Ah! Ah! Several cries of alarm rang out. Once the panicked cries rang out, it attracted the attention of everyone on the street. Among the cries of alarm, one came from the fat girl, another came from the shopkeeper of the tea stall, and the last one came from the young family head who had rushed over from a distance and witnessed the scene. Bang! Hiss! The sound of a heavy object falling to the ground rang out, followed by the sound of a gasp. For a moment, the scene fell silent. Everyone's eyes widened as they stared in astonishment at the fat girl lying on top of the old woman. As for the old woman who had fallen to the ground, other than the sound of a gasp, she could not even make a sound of alarm or cry for help. Had she been crushed to death? Everyone's hearts trembled and they were all dumbfounded for a moment. No one reacted and stepped forward to help the fat girl up. It was the fat girl who had fallen to the ground who regained her senses first and hurriedly got up. Granny? Granny, how are you? Are you all right? I didn't do it on purpose. I didn't know I would crush you. She stood there helplessly, her eyes red from anxiety and worry. Tears welled up in her eyes. She wanted to step forward to help the old woman up, but she was afraid that she would use too much strength and hurt the old woman again. Fingio lay on the ground and gasped, feeling extremely uncomfortable from being crushed. She paused for a moment before exhaling. She was then helped up by the young family head and the fat girl who had rushed over. Granny, are you all right? The young family head glared at his daughter. Little girl, look at yourself. If you're looking for someone, just look for someone. Why did you knock down an old woman? This old woman's bones are usually very weak. If you break them just by sitting on them, I'd like to see what you're going to do. The fat girl lowered her head and said softly, I didn't know I would bump into someone. It's all that person's fault for pushing me so hard just now. As she said that, she turned around to look for the young man who had pushed her. Who knew that he had already run away when he saw that the situation was not right? Unable to find her, the chubby girl bit her lips and tugged at her father's sleeve, saying, Father, let's bring this old granny home. Let the doctor take a look at her and see if she's hurt anywhere. Oh right, I have some medicine for internal injuries here. You can give it to Grandma. As she spoke, she rummaged through her space ring and found a pill for treating internal injuries. She held the pill to Fingio's mouth and said, Granny, don't worry. If you suffer from internal injuries, you'll be fine after taking this pill. It's okay if you don't recover. Come home with me, my father will take care of you. Come, take this pill first. Fingio stared at the chubby girl who was about to stuff a pill into her mouth. He felt his scalp go numb. This fat lass looked normal, but why was her behavior so abnormal? Hearing his daughter's words, Patriarch Yang's eyelids twitched. Glancing at his daughter, who specialized in deceiving him, he secretly shook his head, sighed, and stepped forward. Waiter, don't mess around. Put the pill away. This silly girl, she didn't even look at the grade of the inner core. She actually took it out and gave it to an old woman without saying anything. Chapter 1921. Someone come. Take this old lady to the Rinshin Hall in the city and ask Dr. Hong to examine her injuries. Before he finished speaking, he was stunned by his daughter's actions. Father, don't trouble yourself. I'll carry the old lady there. I knocked her down, so I have to take responsibility. The chubby girl bent her back to Fingio without saying anything. While Fingio was still stunned, she directly carried her on her back and ran to the medical hall. Being carried by a girl and running, Fingio was also dumbfounded. What the hell is going on? She looked at the chubby girl under her, thought for a moment, and said, Chubby girl, put me down. I'm not injured. No, people under me will definitely be injured. I'm afraid your ribs are broken, so I have to check. The chubby girl said. Even though she was carrying a person, she was still running as fast as flying. Seeing the chubby girl's breathing was steady and her pace was fast as she shuttled through the streets, her eyes flashed and she carefully sized her up. Seeing that the chubby girl's cultivation was not bad, she could not help but ask curiously. You're getting married today? The chubby girl was still wearing her wedding clothes. That was the marriage arranged by my grandfather. I saw that the boy from the Ruan family was quite good-looking, so I wanted to marry him. Who knew that he would run away? But it doesn't matter. I met an even better-looking little brother earlier, and I'm looking for him. Old lady, have you seen him? He's wearing blue clothes and looks very, very handsome. Fingzhou's mouth twitched. I haven't seen him. He should be from another place. I don't think he's from our city. If he was from the city, it's impossible that I don't know. As she spoke, she turned into an alley. However, suddenly, her body stiffened and she fell down. Fingzhou jumped down from her back and patted the fat girl who was lying on the ground with her eyes wide open in astonishment. She smiled and said, "Little girl, we'll meet again. Your acupoints will be unlocked soon." As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and walked out while humming a tune. However, not long after she walked out of the alley and was still looking at some small things on the street, she caught a glimpse of a few rogue cultivators walking toward the alley with their arms around each other's shoulders and laughing. She couldn't help but stop in her tracks and frown slightly. The chubby girl's acupoints should not have been unsealed yet. Those people did not seem like good people. If they entered the alley and saw the chubby girl lying on the ground. Thinking of this, she walked towards the alley. If her unintentional actions had harmed that fat girl, her conscience would not be at ease. At this moment, just as Fingzhou had guessed, the few men who had entered the alley with their arms around each other couldn't help but laugh out loud when they saw the fat girl lying on the ground. Look, there's actually a woman here, and she's even wearing a wedding dress. Do you want us brothers to be the bridegroom again? Ha ha ha. This woman is like the full moon on the 15th of August. Her entire body is round, what's there to see? But the things on her should be worth a lot of money. Just the jade pendant on her waist should be enough for us brothers to eat and drink for a few months. Chapter 1922. TSK. So what? Let's take her belongings first, then kill her and throw her into a corner. Who would know that we did it? One of the men said viciously as he stared at the fat girl's belongings. Look at the items on her body. They are all treasures. The young family head dotes on his daughter the most. She must have a lot of things on her. As he spoke, the man smiled sinisterly and said to the men beside him, "Go and keep an eye on the alley. Don't let anyone come in and spoil the fun." What kind of fun can we do in broad daylight? Fingzhou, who was dressed as an old woman, walked in with a walking stick in her hand. Her voice was old and hoarse. When she appeared, the men burst into laughter. I was wondering who it was. So it's an old woman. Did she send herself to her death? Kill her. One of them ordered the person beside him with a sinister voice filled with viciousness. When the fat girl on the ground saw Fingzhou return, surprise flashed across her eyes. She secretly used her spiritual energy to break through her acupuncture points, hoping that her sealed acupuncture points could be unsealed as soon as possible. Killing all of you would dirty my hands, and I would be busy dealing with the corpses, Fingzhou said as she stood there without moving. Instead, she called out, "Swallow Cloud." As soon as she said that, a ray of light flashed and Swallow Cloud leaped out of thin air. It pounced on one of the men and bit off his neck. Crack! Ah! When the sound of bones breaking rang out, the man let out a blood-curdling scream. The smell of fresh blood filled the air. The bloody scene, coupled with Swallow Cloud's ferocious aura and coercion, scared the men so much that they fell to the ground and wet their pants. Super divine beast. They couldn't run at all. Their faces had turned ghastly pale, and they didn't even have the strength to flee under the powerful pressure. Just as they were about to collapse, Tun Yun pounced forward and bit off their necks. It wasn't long before the entire alley was filled with the dense smell of blood. After the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn, Fengjiu walked a few steps on the busy street and turned back to look. She saw the fat girl's eyes shining and smiling as she followed behind her. She could not help but sigh helplessly and stop in her tracks. "How long are you going to follow me? Didn't I tell you? I'm a girl, not a guy." That place was filled with the stench of blood. Coupled with the ferocity of the swallowing cloud, she had originally thought that the chubby girl would be so frightened that she would quickly flee. Who would have thought that the chubby girl would follow closely behind her and even stare at her with a smile? That gaze and that demeanor really made her extremely speechless. "I know that. But you haven't told me your name yet, have you? If you leave, where can I find you to play in the future?" Yang Xiao quickly stepped forward and asked. Fengjiu looked at her and asked, "Where is the Nalan family?" "The Nalan family?" Yang Xiao's eyes darted around. She looked at her and asked, "You're from the Nalan family?" She then added, "I know where it is. I'll take you there." Just as the two of them were heading towards the Nalan family, the atmosphere in the Nalan family was strange. In the main hall of the Nalan family. Chapter 1923. The Nalan family's head and his youngest son looked at each other, feeling puzzled. He paused for a moment before asking, "Young master, who are you waiting for? If it's someone from my residence, I can send someone to call him over." "No need, the person I'm waiting for will be here soon." Xianyuan Mo sipped his tea and said. Hearing this, the Nalan family's head and Nalan Xian were startled. The person they were waiting for will be here soon. Even though this black-robed man didn't speak much, and his pressure and aura were restrained, they could still see that this person wasn't ordinary. He sat there leisurely sipping his tea, which made them, as the host, seem somewhat restrained and cautious. They couldn't be blamed, but this black-robed man faintly emitted a noble aura. That kind of aura of a superior, even if they saw it, they wouldn't dare to be presumptuous in front of him. However, did anyone in their family know such a person? If there was, it was probably only. The father and son looked at each other, and the same person appeared in their minds. This black-robed man couldn't have come for his eldest son, right? The Nalan family's head pondered for a moment, and felt that this was very likely. Perhaps, this black-robed man was Mo Chen's friend. Then he was sitting here and waiting. Could it be that Mo Chen knew he was coming? Would he be here soon? The Nalan family's head gave his youngest son a look, and he saw Nalan Xian quietly leaving the hall and heading towards the backyard. Although Hui Lang, who was standing behind Xianyuan Mo's, was standing respectfully, his eyes were still looking outside the hall from time to time. Did that familiar figure not come? When they received news that the ghost doctor was most likely already in the city, their master brought them to the Nalan family. He said that the ghost doctor might not know where they were staying, so she would definitely come to the Nalan family first. Rather than going outside to look for her, it was better to wait for her to come to the Nalan family. However, they had been sitting here for a while, but they didn't see young Master Mo Chin. Could it be that he was traumatized by being thrown into the brothel by their master that day? So he didn't dare to come out to meet her. That shouldn't be possible, right? Mo Chin wasn't that kind of person. At this time, Fengjiu and the fat girl were standing in front of Nalan Manor's door. Looking at the words Nalan Manor, Fengjiu gestured, "Go, knock on the door." All right. The chubby girl nodded and quickly stepped forward to knock on the door. Not long after, an old man came to open the door. When he saw the two people outside, he was startled and asked, "Who are you looking for?" The fat girl was also stunned for a moment. After a while, she turned to look at Fengzhou and asked, "Who are we looking for?" Fengzhou narrowed his eyes and said with a smile in an old voice, "I'm looking for Nalan and Mo Chin." "You two are." The old man hesitantly looked at the two people in front of him. He was puzzled. Why were there so many guests today? His friend, Fengzhou said. "How about this? Please come in and take a seat. The clan head and the others are in the main hall." Once they were inside, the clan head would make a decision. Thus, the old man invited the two people in and had someone quickly report to the clan head. At this time, the Nalan clan head, who was sitting in the main hall and drinking tea and feeling the strange atmosphere, glanced at the black-robed man from time to time. He wondered how long this person was going to sit there. Then, he heard someone quickly come in and report. Chapter 1924. Hearing this, the Nalan family head's first reaction was, "Why is there someone else here? It can't be another freak, right?" Just as he was about to speak, he saw from the corner of his eye that the black-robed man sitting to the side finally put down the teacup in his hand and looked up. Seeing his gaze, he couldn't help but chuckle. "My eldest son hasn't returned for a long time, maybe some of his friends have come to pay a visit." As he spoke, he ordered the people outside the hall, "Quickly invite them in." Xianyuan Mose listened and didn't say anything, but his gaze had already moved outside. Hui Lang, who was standing behind him, also looked outside with some joy in his eyes. Sure enough, as master guest, the ghost doctor will definitely come here. Not long after, when they saw two figures leisurely walk in from outside, Hui Lang was a little dumbfounded. He stared at the two figures left and right, guessing, could it be that one of them is the ghost doctor? When the Nalan family head saw that it was the young family head's most beloved second daughter who came in, and an old woman with a walking stick in her hand, he was also a little stunned. He had seen the young family's second daughter before, but what was up with that old woman? Moreover, didn't they say that the young family's eldest daughter was searching the streets for a green-robed youth? Why did she come to his house? At this moment, Xianyuan Mose, who was sitting, looked at the two people who came in, then stood up and walked over, step by step, to the old woman. When Fengzhou saw him here, other than being surprised, she was also pleasantly surprised. Just as she was wondering if he would be able to recognize her in her current state, she saw that he had already walked in front of her with large strides. Thus, she raised her head slightly, revealing a smile. Her eyes narrowed as she smiled, and said in an old and hoarse voice, "Young man, you're really handsome." Hearing this, Xianyuan Mose's deep black eyes flashed with a smile, and a touch of gentleness appeared on his stern face. He looked at the person in front of him, and said in a low and magnetic voice, "Then did he catch your eye?" "If he caught my eye, can I bring him home?" she asked with a smile. Hearing this, and seeing the two looking at each other, the fat girl and the Nalan family head were a little dumbfounded. What the hell was this? Why couldn't they understand what they were seeing and hearing? Could it be that these two people knew each other? The black-robed man sat and didn't speak before. Why did he run to the old woman now? Was there something special about this old woman? As he was thinking, he saw the black robe to touch her face, Tuz's face, but his actions and expressions, he had a layer of goosebumps, SSSSSSS. Xianyuan Mose gently caressed Fengzhou's aged face. So this is what Zhou looks like when she gets old. Fengzhou narrowed her eyes and said, "What do you think?" "Scared?" "How could that be?" As he spoke, he reached out to hold her hand and said, "I've been waiting for you here for a long time." Since you're back, let's go back. Fingzhou smiled and narrowed his eyes. Alright, do you know where Lang Hua and the others are? I know. Well, then you have to tell Mo Qin, lest he keeps worrying. Just leave a message. Xianyuan Mo said, his voice paused, and a smile flashed through his eyes. Also, I don't think he wants to see anyone recently. Chapter 1925. Let's talk as we walk. He held her hand and said. Fingzhou smiled slightly. Okay, I'll tell Nalan family head. Thus, Xianyuan Mose held her hand and walked forward, arriving in front of Nalan family head who had a complicated gaze. Nalan family head, I'm Fingzhou. I wonder if Mo Qin has mentioned me to you. Hearing this, Nalan family head was stunned for a moment, then quickly reacted. This clear voice didn't sound old at all. So this old woman was Fingzhou, the ghost doctor in disguise. Thinking of this, he looked up and down again, and couldn't help but sigh. This disguise technique was so exquisite, even if he didn't say anything, he wouldn't have been able to tell that it was a disguise. So you're the ghost doctor, sorry for the disrespect. He hurriedly cupped his hands in greeting and said, my eldest son has instructed me to treat you as a guest of honor if you come. Please, take a seat. My youngest son has already gone to call his eldest brother. He should be here soon. Before Fingzhou could speak, Xianyuan Mose had already said, no, we're going back. Nalan family head was stunned for a moment, his gaze couldn't help but look at Fingzhou, then at the black-robed man. So, this person was waiting for Fingzhou here. Could it be that after asking for so long, he didn't say who he was waiting for? Fingzhou glanced at Xianyuan Mose, his eyes smiling, and said to Nalan family head, then I'll have to trouble Nalan family head to tell Mo Qin that I've arrived. I'll invite him for tea another day. So it's like that. That's fine, I'll let him know later. Saying this, Nalan family head looked at Yang Xiao and asked, how did this Yang family's second miss? Oh, that's because I met her on the road. I didn't know where the Nalan family was, so she said she would bring me here. Later, I'll have to trouble the Nalan family head to send someone to send her home. Fingzhou looked at the chubby girl and then glanced at the excited Huilang. So that's how it is. No problem. I'll get someone to send her back later. The Nalan family's head nodded and said. Yang Xiao shouted, I'm not going back. She ran to Fingzhou's side and grabbed Fingzhou's clothes tightly with her chubby claws. She looked up at him angrily and said, I don't want to go home. I want to follow you. Besides, you said on the way that you have a lot of good-looking people there. I can go and have a look. Xianyuan Mose saw that Fingzhou didn't dislike the chubby girl, so he didn't push her away. Instead, he let her go to Fingzhou's side and waited for her to deal with the matter herself. After Huilang heard the chubby girl's words, his expression couldn't help but become strange. He looked at the chubby girl, then looked at Fingzhou, and then lowered his head to look at himself. It's over. This ghost doctor wants to matchmake this chubby girl. Although he wasn't as handsome as his master, he wasn't bad either. If this chubby girl took a fancy to him, would he be forcefully sent to her by the ghost doctor? Thinking of this, he moved his feet and quietly retreated outside. Regardless of anything else, it was better for him to hide first. Otherwise, if she really took a fancy to him, he would cry but have no tears. When the Nalan family head heard this, he was also startled. Then, he shook his head and smiled. This Yang family's second miss really dared to say anything. Chapter 1926. Really? That's great. The fat girl excitedly hugged Fingzhou's arm and cheered. Xianyuan Mose's eyebrows jumped, and he glanced at her with a dark expression. Let go. Fingzhou didn't say anything, but he couldn't help but shout. When the fat girl heard this voice, she instinctively let go of Fengzhou's arm and stood to the side. She couldn't help it. That person's face was dark, and his aura was very scary. She was scared just by looking at him. Let's go. Xianyuanmo said to Fengzhou and led her out. Wait. She smiled slightly and looked at Nalan family head. Nalan family head, can I borrow a room? Let me change my clothes. She went out with this appearance. Even if she didn't care, she couldn't ignore Mo's face. Of course. Nalan family head smiled and called the people outside to take Fengzhou to the guest room. Xianyuanmo wanted to stop her, but seeing her look, he didn't say anything and let her go. When Fengzhou appeared in front of everyone in a simple but dazzling red dress, Xianyuanmo and Hui Lang, who were used to her appearance, quietly admired her. Nalan family head's eyes flashed with amazement and surprise. He didn't expect that in less than half an incense stick's time, she seemed to have changed into a different person. Moreover, she was such a beautiful woman. Seeing Fengzhou at this moment, he finally knew why the information he had collected at that time described this woman as a peerless beauty. Her appearance and temperament were indeed unmatched and stunning. The plump lass was overjoyed when she saw this and couldn't help but pinch her round waist. What she saw was her slender waist after changing into women's clothing. Her waist was so thin that it would take two of them together to fit her round waist. She didn't think that she was fat before, and she never envied the waists of her sisters at home. But now, looking at her fleshy waist, she suddenly felt inferior. Let's go. Fengzhou said to them. After bidding farewell to the Nalan family head, he held Xianyuanmo's hand and left. He couldn't help but sigh as he watched the man and woman leave. They were so outstanding and matched so well. He had originally thought that his eldest son wouldn't have a chance. However, it seemed that this was a case of mutual affection. It seemed that his son wouldn't have a chance. Oh, right. Why hadn't his youngest son returned after so long? Don't tell me I'm trapped in that formation again. Thinking of him, he hurriedly shouted, Men! Someone come quickly. Go and see if the second young master is. Before he could finish his words, he flicked his sleeves and hurriedly walked out. Forget it, I'll make a trip myself. In the backyard of Mo Chen's courtyard, Mo Chen was lying on a soft couch and reading a book. He knew that someone had broken into the outer courtyard's formation, but he didn't pay attention to it. His younger brother and younger sister ran to him every 2 to 3 days. He really didn't have the energy to deal with them. Therefore, he set up a soundproof barrier while setting up the formation. He also changed the formation so that it wouldn't hurt people. It would only trap people inside and couldn't get out. No matter how they shouted inside, he wouldn't hear them here. He was happy with the peace and quiet. Chapter 1927. Fengzhou, who had just left the Nalan residence, suddenly stopped and turned around to look at the chubby girl behind her. If you follow me back, won't your father be anxious to find you? It's okay, I'm sure I'll meet my family members on the way. I'll let them go back and inform them. She smiled with a pair of crescent moon-like eyes as she looked around the street. Seeing this, Fengzhou sighed softly and said to Hui Lang behind him, You go and tell the Nalan residents to pass a message to the Yang residents. Yes. Hui Lang responded and quickly walked back. Master. Several voices filled with surprise sounded. Fengzhou looked forward and saw Du Fan, Ling Shuang and the others quickly walking over. Seeing them, she smiled and said, It's you guys. Master, we heard that you've arrived. We looked around the street but couldn't find you, so we came to the Nalan residence. You really are here. Du Fan said and bowed to Xianyuanmo. Yama Lord. Xianyuan Mose nodded slightly and said to Fingzhou, let's go back first. Yes, master, let's go back first. Okay. Fingzhou responded with a smile and walked forward with them. The chubby girl behind her curiously looked at the three people. She saw that one of them was wearing a crescent moon-like robe and holding a fan in his hand. His appearance was not bad, but if we were to talk about handsomeness, the young man next to him was more handsome. The young man was wearing a simple white robe with a jade pendant tied to his waist. His whole body was simple, but he gave off a very gentle and comfortable feeling. Moreover, he was very good-looking. She smiled and stared at the good-looking and gentle young man. The young man seemed to be aware that she was looking at him and turned around to look at her, revealing a smile to her. Suddenly, she felt her heart beat wildly and her cheeks became hot. She lowered her head in embarrassment, but couldn't help but sneak a glance from the corner of her eyes. Ling Shuang, who was wearing a black robe, glanced at the chubby girl behind him and his eyes moved slightly. Wasn't this the second young miss of the Yang residence? Master, we bought a large residence in the western part of the city. The courtyard inside is quite big. Now that everyone has settled down there, we haven't been idle during this period of time. Other than cultivating, we have also been spreading our influence. Du Fan said to Fingzhou while pointing in front of them, we're almost there. After walking through the main street, we'll be there. That area isn't the center of the city and it's quite quiet. It's also a more expensive area, so there aren't many idle people walking around. Did you choose this place yourselves? Or did Imo-chan help you choose it? She looked at them and asked. Yes, we chose it ourselves. Lang Hua said gently, our Nalan residence has been here for a few days, so we've been walking around and asking around. In the end, we saw that this residence was not bad and bought it. Fingzhou nodded and looked at Xianyuan Mose. What about you? Are you also here? Xianyuan Mose glanced at her, then slowly spoke in a deep and magnetic voice. I bought the house next to yours and got them to open the door. Oh. You bought it with money. She raised her eyebrows. She didn't think that there would be two empty residences in this area. Chapter 1928. Hearing this, Fingzhou finally understood. So she had used pills to exchange for it. That was normal. After all, in this kind of place, money might not be able to buy what one wanted. However, pills were different. Let's go. Let's go home. She smiled slightly and held his hand as they walked forward. Not long after, they saw two neighboring residences. The two residences were connected together and took up a large area. One of the residences had the two words, Feng Residence written on it, while the other had the words, Ling Residence written on it. Ling Residence. Fengzhou was slightly surprised and looked at Xianyuan Mose beside him. He never thought that he would use the name Ling Mohun to set up a residence here. It's just a name. Let's go. He led her towards the Feng residence. Du Fan and the others opened the door first. Once they entered, Fengzhou saw that there were arrays set up in the residence. Furthermore, it was Du Fan's work. Looking at the arrays, she nodded to herself. After not seeing them for a long time, it seemed that Du Fan's arrays had improved. Yang Xiao, who was following behind them, did not see it. She only followed them and occasionally looked at the gentle youth. The more she looked, the more she felt that this youth was good-looking. This subordinate greets master. The sudden sound caused Yang Xiao, to come back to her senses. She looked forward and saw 8 handsome men standing in front of her and bowing to Fingzhou. Looking at the 8 people's handsome and outstanding appearances, she could not help but think in a daze, so there really are a lot of good-looking men here. Let's go in and talk. Fengjiu indicated. After entering, he paused and glanced at Yang Xiao, who had been looking at the Lang Hua, and could not help but smile. Xiao, Ah. Yang Xiao, came back to her senses and looked at Fengjiu. What is it? The Feng Wei and the others looked at the fat girl and thought, where did Master bring such a fat girl back? Who do you think is the most good-looking person here? She looked at her with a teasing smile. Yang Xiao glanced at the crowd in embarrassment. She lowered her head and played with her fingers. She said softly, they're all good-looking. At least, the people here were better looking than the pretty boy from the Ruan family that she had seen before. I see. Fengjiu's eyes flickered, and he asked with a smile, then, pick one from here to accompany you around the residence. Who do you think is the best companion? Hearing this, the 8 Phoenix guards were stunned. What did this mean? This. Yang Xiao hesitated for a moment. His gaze swept across the crowd, and he took small steps to Lang Hua's side. Him. Lang Hua's face still had a gentle expression, but a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. He then smiled and said, that's good. Master, I'll show Miss Yang around the house and have the kitchen prepare some food. As he spoke, he said to Yang Xiao, Miss Yang, this way please. Yang Xiao, was happy and a little shy. She said softly, you can call me Xiao, There's no need to call me Miss Yang. It's too formal. When the people behind heard this, their expressions became strange, especially the 8 Phoenix guards. They looked at Lang Hua and Yang Xiao, with strange expressions. They could even faintly hear the two of them talking. Is that so? All right then. Miss Xiao, are you hungry? Why don't I take you to the kitchen to get some snacks first, and then we'll walk around the garden. Chapter 1929. Feng Wei and the others told Fengjiu about their operation here. After reporting everything, they asked, Master, was it you who brought people to destroy the headquarters of the Dark Knight Temple? That's right. Fengjiu smiled and nodded. After I helped Murongishuan's master treat, I left the Huaxian sect and snuck into their training base. The people of the Dark Knight Temple used drugs to control those who were captured and wanted to train them into spies to infiltrate the 4 great immortal sects. I beat them at their own game and helped train those people to increase their strength. In the end, I gathered them under my command and brought them to destroy the headquarters of the Dark Knight Temple. After the matter was settled, I let them disperse and called them out when I needed them in the future. Everyone listened to her speak casually and explained the matter simply in a few sentences. However, they knew that it probably wasn't that easy for her inside. The Dark Knight Temple was a large force here and there must be layers of checkpoints inside. She was able to destroy the headquarters of the Dark Knight Temple probably because the other party underestimated the enemy. By the way, I also discovered something in there. When she said this, she looked at Xianyuan Mose, who was beside her. Seeing her look, Xianyuan Mose's eyes moved slightly and asked, what is it? I saw Han Rong there. She spoke, her voice slightly heavy. However, he is now a subordinate of the Demon Lord. He has taken over a body and entered the demon path. Moreover, whether it is my Phoenix dynasty or Xianyuan Empire, everything that happened a while ago was instigated by him. Han Rong. Xianyuan Mose's eyes darkened and his face turned cold. I didn't expect him to still be alive. He should have disregarded their old friendship and killed him with one strike. I don't know how he found a spirit stone mine, but he used it as a price to ask the Temple of Darkness to help him. Unfortunately, I didn't have the chance to kill him when he was inside. A murderous look flashed across her eyes, and her voice became cold. Master, don't worry. As long as we know who did it, we will definitely be able to find him. Feng Wei and the others said. Feng Zhou nodded and said, I'll draw his current appearance later. When the time comes, tell your subordinates to pay more attention. The 8 Phoenix guards looked at each other and said, Master, there's one more thing we need to tell you. Feng Zhou looked at them and waited for them to continue. Half a month ago, we received news from the family head. They have already left the valley with the Phoenix guards and returned to the Phoenix dynasty. They said that although the imperial palace is gone, their home is still there. Their ancestors have lived there for generations. They plan to rebuild the Feng Manor and take root there. Speaking to this point, Luo Yu paused for a moment, then said, the family head and master said that even if they want to avoid the world, they cannot avoid it forever. If those people dare to offend them again, they will fight it out with them. This time, they must protect the Feng Manor well and will not allow anyone to destroy it. Hearing this, Feng Zhou was slightly taken aback. He had an indescribable feeling in his heart. That's right. Their ancestors had lived there for generations. How could they just abandon it like that? No matter how strong the enemy was, no matter how afraid they were of being injured, could they just keep avoiding it? They couldn't. Not only would she not avoid it, but they also wouldn't. Chapter 1930. With their current abilities and the destruction of dynasty, it was believed that they would become even more powerful. It was important for a person to be strong, but the strength of their heart was also an important factor. As long as they had the heart and the homeland they wanted to protect, they would gradually become so strong that their enemies would fear them. I've already sent people to keep an eye on the Devil Hall and the Temple of Darkness. They shouldn't make a move against them for the time being. Xianyuan Mo said as he looked at Feng Zhou, you've been quiet for a while. In the following time, it's best to stabilize your footing here as soon as possible and push the name of the ghost doctor to the peak. His voice paused for a moment before he continued, although we cultivators don't have as short a lifespan as mortals, many cultivators are more afraid of death than mortals. They are more worried that they won't live long. Whether it is your medical skills, your cultivation in alchemy, or your talent in alchemy, as long as you use them well, you can naturally reach heights that others can't reach. Hearing this, Feng Zhou's eyes flashed and he said, since that's the case, let's do our old business. Hearing her words, the corners of Xianyuan Mo's lips curled up slightly and he didn't say anything else. Feng Wei, Du Fan, and the others were thinking, old business. What's Master's old business? Medical skills. Or pills. Or medicine. Let's stop here for today. We'll talk about the rest in 2 days. Feng Zhou said as he held Xianyuan Mo's hand, let's take a walk in the backyard and see if the dishes are ready in the kitchen. When the others saw this, they grinned and didn't follow. However, just as Xianyuan Mo followed Feng Zhou with a smile in his eyes, she suddenly stopped in her tracks. Du Fan. Feng Zhou turned around and called out. Master. Du Fan stepped forward and smiled, there's no need to count us in on the drinking. You and the Yama Lord can have a good gathering. Hearing this, Feng Zhou chuckled, of course. I know that even without you saying it. As he spoke, he took out the ancient formation book from the space and handed it to him. This is an ancient formation book I obtained outside. Study it well. Du Fan took the ancient book on array formations and flipped it open with some surprise. He happily expressed his thanks, thank you, Master. Master, if Du Fan has a gift, then do we have one? Luo Yu grinned as he stepped forward and asked. The other Phoenix guards stood at the side and watched with smiles on their faces. Of course I do. Feng Zhou smiled and said, these are all treasures that I obtained outside. I'll bring them to you tomorrow. Thank you, Master. Everyone thanked him happily. Fengzhou shook his head and walked out with Xianyuan. In the large house, all they could see was exquisite scenery. The two of them walked slowly with their fingers interlocked. After walking for a while, the two of them didn't say anything. They just quietly enjoyed this moment of peace. Do you like it here? Xianyuan asked as he stopped in the middle of a flower bush. Yes, it's very good here. I can see that they spent a lot of effort decorating it. She leaned on his shoulder and hugged him with one hand around his waist. Zay, when we get married in the future, let's decorate and design our own home. Chapter 1931. Fengzhou's eyes flickered. Definitely not now. I haven't gained a firm foothold here, and my father and the others have just returned to the Phoenix dynasty. How about this? Once they've restarted everything and built their home, we'll talk about marriage. That works too. As the two of them spoke, they could vaguely hear voices coming their way. They exchanged glances, then looked in the direction of the voices. They saw the chubby girl walking towards them with Langhua. Big brother Langhua, then can I still come and find you in the future? No, can I come and find big sister Feng? Since master brought you here, he naturally allowed it. You can come over if you have time in the future. Langhua said gently. He looked ahead and said, but sometimes we're a little busy here. I'm afraid there will be places where we won't be able to greet you. It's fine. I'll treat this place as my own home. You don't have to greet me. If you're busy, I can even help. Yang Xiao hurriedly said. Langhua smiled when he heard this. He looked ahead and said, Master and the others are in front. Ah. Yang Xiao looked ahead and saw two people standing not too far away, looking at her. She immediately ran over, but as she ran, the ground began to emit heavy thumping sounds. Big sister Feng. She walked around with Langhua. Not only did she familiarize herself with the house, she also found out that his name was Fengzhou. How was it? Did you have fun here? Fengzhou asked with a smile. Her gaze landed on Yang Xiao's rosy, round face. Yes. She nodded heavily and said happily, Big brother Langhua treats me very well. He brought me to the kitchen to get some pastries and some things I haven't eaten before. He even brought me around. Big sister Feng, can I really come back to play in the future? I really like it here. Of course. This is my house. You live in this city too. If you want to play in the future, you can come over. Fengzhou said with a smile, although I sent someone to inform your father, you still have to go home today. You can't stay here for too long, otherwise your family will be worried. Okay. She answered straightforwardly. Then I'll go back now and come back tomorrow morning. Hearing this, Fengzhou's mouth twitched. In the end, he could only smile helplessly and look at Langhua. Let her stay for dinner tonight. After dinner, send her back. Yes, Langhua replied warmly, then said to Yang Xiao, Miss Xiao, let's go to the front. I'll introduce you to the others. Ah. Introduce me to other people. Okay. She nodded happily and said to Fengzhou, Sister Feng, we'll go to the front. See you at dinner tonight. Langhua nodded at Fengzhou and Xianyuan, then led her to the front. Seeing the two of them leave, Fengzhou smiled. This little girl is interesting, isn't she? I don't think so, Xianyuan said indifferently, not even looking in her direction. In his eyes, no one could attract his attention more than she, who was by his side. On the other side, in the Yang residence, the Yang family head, who had lost his daughter because he was looking for her, anxiously paced back and forth in the hall after returning home, looking outside from time to time. He had been back for a while, but his daughter hadn't returned. Where had she run off to? Chapter 1932. Patriarch Yang, who was walking in the hall, was stunned for a moment. Someone from the Nayland family came. Let him in. He shouted outside. Not long after, he saw a servant quickly walk in from outside. Greetings, Patriarch Yang. You are from the Nayland family. Patriarch Yang looked up and down. His family and the Nayland family usually didn't have any friendship. Why did someone from the Nayland family come to their door? The servant took off the token from his waist and handed it forward. Patriarch Yang, I am the servant of the front yard. I was ordered to come here to pass on a few words. Patriarch Yang confirmed that the token was correct and handed it back. He asked doubtfully, what words? It's like this. The second miss of your house left with a guest of our house. She should return home later, so you don't have to worry. The servant quickly said. A guest of your house. Patriarch Yang was startled when he heard this. Why would my servant leave with a guest of your house? Who is your guest? Is it a man or a woman? Will my servant be in any danger? Where did they go? Listening to him ask several questions in a row, the servant's eyelids twitched. He said, this little one doesn't know. I just came to pass on a message to tell Patriarch Yang not to worry. Patriarch Yang trusts people, so there shouldn't be any problems. This little one has already passed on the message and will return first. Patriarch Yang frowned as he watched the servant leave. He returned to the main seat and sat down to ponder. Why did his daughter leave with someone? She couldn't have left with a man, right? This girl was really too worrisome. She was deliberately making him worry at home. Thus, ever since the manservant left, he had been wandering around the house, waiting. Even when the sun had set, his daughter still hadn't returned. Seeing that the sky was getting darker, he thought about how his daughter had gone out with someone and hadn't returned even though it was already so late. He couldn't sit still at home. No, I have to go to the Nayland family and ask. He asked someone to prepare a sedan. When he was about to go out, he suddenly heard a familiar voice. Father. He turned around abruptly. Waiter. He quickly walked there and looked at his daughter from head to toe. Child, where did you go? Why are you back so late? Don't you know that Daddy will be worried at home? As he spoke, he sniffed and frowned. You even drank. Hee, Father, your nose is so sharp. But I didn't drink too much. I only drank 2 cups. Young Xiao said happily, today, I went to Sister Feng's house to play. Her house is really beautiful. Daddy, I want to go there again tomorrow. What big Sister Feng? Where did Sister Feng come from? The young family head frowned as he asked. His gaze swept across the crowd and landed on the white-robed young man. And who are you? Leng Hua stepped forward and bowed, smiling warmly. Young family head, this one's surname is Leng. I was ordered by my master to bring your daughter back. Daddy, he is Leng Hua's older brother. Young Xiao held her father's hand as she spoke. Her crescent moon-like eyes beamed as she looked at the gentle and handsome young man. Who is your master? He frowned. Who was this person? Who was his master? Was there anyone in this city that he didn't know? Chapter 1933. Seeing the young man leave, Master Yang took his daughter home and asked carefully. On the other side, in Nayland's house. Nayland Imo-chan sat in the courtyard drinking tea, thinking about the news he heard before. Feng Zhou came to his house, but he didn't know at that time and didn't care about the trapped people, so he missed the opportunity to see her. He held the teacup in his hand and gently played with it while looking at the dark sky. He looked at the crescent moon peeking out from behind the clouds and thought of something. He smiled slightly, put down the teacup, stood up, brushed his robe gently, and stepped out. After taking a bath, Feng Zhou took out a set of white pajamas from the space and put it on. She didn't have a chance to wear it outside, but in her own place, she could wear whatever was comfortable. Xianyuan Mose sat in the courtyard drinking tea. When he heard the door open and saw her wearing the strange clothes and walking out with her hair dripping with water, his eyes flashed slightly. "Come here." He reached out his hand and called. Feng Zhou put her hand in his and walked forward 2 steps before she was pulled over. She turned her body and sat on his lap. The small bath towel in her hand was also taken and used to wipe the water droplets at the end of her hair. His movements were very gentle and his expression was serious. He used a trace of spiritual power in his palm and after a while, the wet hair became dry again and softly draped behind her back. He quietly stroked her waist with one hand and pinched her left and right. Before Feng Zhou could say anything, she heard a low voice in her ear, "Your waist has become thinner." Feng Zhou glanced at him and saw that his cold face was full of seriousness, as if he didn't have any other thoughts. However, that pair of black eyes was deep and serene. After stroking twice, he didn't let go of his hand. He even put his chin on her shoulder and began to move his other hand. Her mouth twitched slightly and said, "This is the first time I've seen someone take advantage of me so openly." Hearing this, Xianyuan Mose's lips curved slightly and his voice was a little hoarse. "I want to check other places to see if you've lost weight." He turned her body, one hand around her waist, the other moving up from her waist to her shoulder. He turned her face to him. Looking at the teasing smile on her face, he leaned over domineeringly and kissed the red lips of his dreams. Their lips touched, sometimes gentle and careful like a treasure, sometimes domineering and aggressive, as if to swallow her up. Their lips and tongues played, saliva mixed together, extremely lingering. His hand, which was originally on her shoulder, had slipped into her clothes and was rubbing and caressing her gently. It was as if he wanted to melt her into his body. Feng Zhou let out a soft groan. She wrapped her arms around his neck and passionately responded to his plundering. In the large courtyard, there was no one else except the two of them. It was quiet all around, and only the sound of their breathing and soft groans could be heard. After being separated for a long time and not seeing each other for a long time, once the passion was ignited, it was uncontrollable. Chapter 1934. At this moment, her cheeks were flushed with an enchanting blush. Her beautiful eyes were blurred due to her arousal, and her delicate lips were slightly red and swollen from the passionate kiss. Her red lips were slightly parted, and her breath smelled like orchids. Her posture, her expression, it was as if she was inviting him to have a taste. Looking at her, he couldn't help but lean down again and kiss those slightly parted red lips. Sitting on Xianyuan Mose's lap, Feng Zhou felt a familiar heat when she moved her body slightly. Sitting on his lap, she shifted her body uncomfortably. Who knew that when she moved, she would hear a muffled groan from him? Xianyuan Mose's body stiffened. With a muffled groan, he held her waist with both hands. His originally low and magnetic voice sounded even more hoarse at this moment. "Don't move." Hearing his words, Feng Zhou also stiffened. She glared at him unhappily. "I'm not sitting comfortably." It was clearly a glare, but in that moment, in Xianyuan Mose's eyes, her glare was coquettish with a hint of annoyance. That kind of coquettish annoyance made his breathing uncontrollably become a little rough. "Let's go back to the room." He hugged her, and just as he was about to carry her back to the room to continue, he heard an untimely cough. Cough cough. When they heard the cough, the two people sitting at the table stiffened at the same time. They were startled for a moment, and looked in the direction of the cough at the same time. Unknowingly, a white figure was already sitting on top of the wall of their courtyard. That white figure was at the corner of the wall, which happened to be covered by a tree. It was unknown how long that white figure had been there silently watching for. As for that white figure, it was none other than Nalan. Sorry, I'm not disturbing you, am I? Mo-chan sat on the wall and didn't go down. He just asked gently. His immortal-like handsome face carried a gentle and refined smile. His deep, bottomless eyes were looking at the two people at the table. Xianyuanmo's expression darkened, and his face instantly darkened. He was certain that he had done it on purpose. Seeing that it was him, Fingzhou's face showed a trace of embarrassment. He didn't expect to be caught red-handed when he finally got intimate. How long had he been sitting there? And for how long? The two of them didn't even notice that he had come. They were really too careless. Thinking about how he had seen the passionate scene between the two of them just now, her already flushed cheeks became even redder, and there was a trace of embarrassment on her face. It wasn't a big deal to be caught being intimate with someone, but it wouldn't be good if the extent of their intimacy was too big and was seen by others. Mo-chan, who was dressed in white and looked like a banished immortal, sat on top of the wall. He looked at the two people sitting at the table and took in their expressions. His gaze swept past Xianyuanmo's darkened face and landed on Fengzhou, who was in his arms. Her cheeks were flushed, and her entire body was emitting a charming and shy aura. His eyes flashed slightly. He had never seen her like this before. She was even more charming and enchanting than usual. Even he, whose heart was as still as water, couldn't take his eyes off her. Chapter 1935. She reached out and hugged Fengzhou tightly in her arms. She lifted her sleeves to cover her face, which was different from her usual charming and enchanting appearance. At the same time, she asked coldly, "What are you doing here?" "I heard that Ihjo is back, so I came to take a look and catch up." Mo-chan's voice was gentle. He smiled as he looked at Xianyuanmo, who was sitting at the table. It seemed that he had no intention of leaving. Fengzhou pushed Xianyuanmo's sleeves aside and looked at Mo-chan, who was sitting on the wall. "I didn't see you when I went to your house today. I wanted to ask you out for a drink in 2 days. I think tonight's night is pretty good," Mo-chan said as his smiling gaze fell on Xianyuanmo's. Hearing this, and thinking about what they had just done, Fengzhou coughed uncomfortably and said, "Let's forget about tonight. I'll treat you to a drink in 2 days." "Drink?" Mo-chan glanced at Fengzhou and sighed softly. He shook his head inwardly. "When you mentioned drinking, I remembered that I was plotted against a few days ago." These words aroused Fengzhou's curiosity. Plotted against? With his strength, who could easily plot against him? And what did this have to do with drinking? Could it be that he had been drugged? It's a long story. It's still early, so I'll tell you slowly. Hearing this, Xianyuanmo's and Fengzhou's lips twitched. Was he going to tell a story here? Xianyuanmo's glanced at him and said coldly, "Are you leaving on your own? Or should I ask someone to send you off?" Mo-chan smiled and ignored Xianyuanmo's. Instead, he looked at Fengzhou and said, "Ah Joe, tonight's night is quite beautiful. Do you want to go up the wall and take a look?" Seeing this, Xianyuanmo's emitted a cold aura like an ice blade. Just as he was about to speak, Fengzhou gently patted his shoulder to calm him down. Xianyuanmo snorted coldly and retracted his aura. "Mo-chan, are you trying to disturb us?" Fengzhou asked with a smile. He remained in Xianyuanmo's arms and did not get up. Mo Chen smiled. Why would I? His voice only paused for a moment as he looked at the two of them with an indescribable light in his eyes. He said meaningfully, actually, even if I didn't come, the two of you wouldn't have achieved anything good. Hearing this, the two of them frowned. Xianyuan Mose glanced at him but did not speak. Fengzhou asked, What do you mean? It's not time yet, he said gently. Seeing her confusion, he explained with a smile, It's true that you are the Phoenix Star, and Xianyuan is the Emperor Star. However, it's not that easy to combine the two of you. Why is that? There shouldn't be any difference, right? Is there a difference? She did not understand and was deep in thought. Even Xianyuan Mose furrowed his brows. In his mind, he thought that every time they were about to do something good, it would always be interrupted. Not only that, even the marriage was delayed again and again, as if there was something obstructing it. Heaven's secrets cannot be revealed. He smiled and did not speak. Instead, he looked at the two of them and sighed. Since I'm not very popular, I'll go back first. I'll wait for you to treat me to a drink. Chapter 1936. After Mo Chen left, Xianyuan Mose and Fengzhou looked at each other in dismay. After a moment of silence, Xianyuan Mose asked, Do you believe him? No. Fengzhou smiled so widely that her eyes turned into crescents. She wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered into his ear, Let's go into the room and continue. Hearing this blatant invitation, Xianyuan Mose's eyes darkened. He looked at her and his lips curved, Okay. With that, he picked her up in his arms and walked into the room. With a kick, he closed the door. However, just as the two were deep in love, Ying Yi came out of the courtyard and respectfully reported, Master, an old man has come to the residence. He calls himself Stillwater Immortal Monarch. In the room, Xianyuan Mose heard this and a trace of surprise flashed through his eyes. On one hand, it was because the two of them had been interrupted again. On the other hand, it was because this person was actually Stillwater Immortal Monarch, his mysterious master. Seeing the surprise on Xianyuan Mose's face, Fengzhou pulled up the blanket to cover his naked body and asked, Stillwater Immortal Monarch. Who is he? He is the master who taught me for a period of time. As he spoke, he had already gotten up and put on his clothes. As he was tying his belt, his hands paused and he looked at Fengzhou on the bed. You rest first. I'll go take a look. Okay. Fengzhou replied. Seeing him put on his clothes and walk out, she turned over and propped her head on one hand as she thought, could it be that they still have to experience something? What is the obstacle? Did Mo Chen really hit the mark? Mo Chen was Tianji Elder's disciple. Could it be that he was also a swindler? Or a swindler with some skill? At the same time, in the Ling residence, an old man in gray robes was sitting in the hall, drinking tea. His hair was silver, but there were no wrinkles on his face. His complexion was ruddy, and his complexion was very good. He sat there, and his aura was restrained, making it impossible for others to sense his cultivation level. It was as if he had merged with heaven and earth, and looked very harmonious. Hui Lang, who was standing outside, looked inside from time to time, trying to guess what kind of immortal this immortal master of still water was. How could he be so sure that their master would see him? In the hall, Ji Shui Immortal Lord drank a few mouthfuls of tea and then put down the teacup. No one knew what he was thinking, but his expression was pensive. It was only when he heard the commotion outside that he looked outside. Master. When Hui Lang saw that his master had returned, he hurriedly went up to greet him. That old man has been sitting inside for a while. He said he is Immortal Master Ji Shui. Xianyuan Mose glanced at him and said in a deep voice, don't be impudent. That's my master. Ah. Hui Lang was so frightened that his legs turned to jelly, and he did not dare to say another word. He actually called his master's master an old man. He better not let him hear it. But, was this person really his master's master's master? How come they had never seen him before? Xianyuan Mose walked in, and when his gaze met the gaze of the old man inside, he went up and clasped his hands in greeting. Master. Towards this master who had secretly taught him in the past, even though the time they had spent together was not long, but he still had a lot of respect for him. Ji Shui Immortal Lord looked him up and down, then nodded. After not seeing you for so many years, your strength has improved a lot. Chapter 1937. Immortal Lord Ji Shui didn't think that there was anything wrong with his direct question. His expression was natural, as if he was already used to Xianyuan Mose's indifference. After all, when he met Xianyuan Mose when he was young, he was a cold-hearted person. Therefore, he said directly, Master is going overseas, and I hope you can come with me. Hearing this, Xianyuan Mose's eyes flashed. Master, do you not have anyone else to choose? I have some matters to attend to recently, and I'm afraid it will be difficult for me to accompany you. Compared to going overseas, he wanted to stay by Fengzhou's side and help her stabilize her position here. It's not that I don't have anyone else, but no one is more suitable than you. Immortal Master Ji Shui looked at him and said in a low voice, the most important matter of this trip is to borrow your strength and your Xianyuan sword. Therefore, you are the only one who can go on this trip. It is because of this that I came to invite you to come with me. Xianyuan Mose frowned. He did not speak, but was deep in thought. Seeing this, Immortal Master Ji Shui asked, What matters do you have here? I can have someone take care of it for you. How long will you be gone for? He looked up and asked. It's hard to say. Immortal Master Ji Shui shook his head. It was difficult to estimate the time. I need to think about it. He stood up and said to Immortal Master Ji Shui, Master, you can stay in my residence for the next few days. I will let you know in a few days whether you want to go or not. Hearing this, Immortal Master Ji Shui sighed inwardly. He knew that he did not want to go with him at all. After all, he also knew that although he called him master, the time they had spent together was too little, and the time they had taught each other was also very short. Moreover, they had not seen each other for many years. To make such a request as soon as they met was indeed too much. Immortal Master Ji Shui stood up and said, All right. I hope you will consider it carefully. If there is anything you are worried about, you can tell me. I can have someone take care of it for you, so you will have no worries. Hui Lang, bring Immortal Master to the backyard to rest. Xianyuan Mose called out. Yes. Hui Lang walked in and gestured towards Immortal Lord Ji Shui. Immortal Lord, please come this way. After he left, Xianyuan Mose stood with his hands behind his back for a while. Only then did he walk towards the small door that connected the two manors. Arriving in the Feng Manor's backyard, Fengzhou's courtyard, he pushed open the door and walked in. When he came to the inner room, he saw that the person on the bed was already asleep. He took off his coat and lay down beside the bed. Reaching out, he pulled her into his embrace. You're back. Fengzhou murmured without opening his eyes. He smelled the fragrance of her hair and responded. Why is your master looking for you? You're back so soon. Don't you need to accompany him? Fengzhou snuggled into his arms, wrapping his arms around his waist and placing one leg on top of his. Xianyuan Mose gently hugged her and said, It's nothing. I had him rest first. Hui Lang is there to take care of him. Go to sleep. He gently patted her as he spoke. He could feel the happiness and peace of his beloved lying in his embrace. Hearing him say that it was nothing, Fengjiu did not ask any further. She only muttered, "Tomorrow, I will be going around the city to see if there are any suitable shops. Come with me." "All right," he responded. "You also want to go shopping with me?" "All right." Chapter 1938. The next day, Xianyuan Mose and Fengjiu woke up in the morning. Ling Shuang placed the breakfast he had prepared in the courtyard and left. Fengjiu poured a bowl of porridge for him and asked, "Do I need to pay a visit to your Shizhuan?" After all, he was his Shizhuan, and the two families were neighbors. It would be rude if he didn't meet him. There's no rush. He picked up some side dishes for her. "Eat. We'll go take a look in the city later. We'll talk about meeting him in a few days." Seeing that he said this, Fengjiu didn't mention it again. The two ate breakfast and were about to leave when Ling Shuang reported, "Master, that girl is here." Hearing this, Fengjiu chuckled, "It's good that she's here. She should be familiar with the city. Let her show us around." As he spoke, he walked out with Xianyuan Mose. Ling Shuang followed behind. In the outer courtyard, Yang Xiao, who was wearing a dark green dress, happily ran forward when she saw Fengjiu. "Fengjia, I'm here again." Fengjiu smiled, "We're planning on going out to look for a shop today. You came just in time. Come with us." "Okay, I'm familiar with the city. What kind of shop are you looking for? Tell me and I'll show you." She smiled as her eyes narrowed. "We'll talk as we walk." She turned around and said to Ling Shuang and Leng Hua behind her, "You two come with us." "Yes." The two responded and stood behind her. Yang Xiao was very happy when she heard this. Her eyes narrowed into slits as she glanced at Leng Hua. Her round face was flushed with excitement. "That's great. Leng Hua Gij is coming with us." The group went out and under Yang Xiao's lead, they walked towards the busiest part of the city. On the main street, their appearance attracted a lot of attention. After all, the men were handsome and the women were beautiful. Their noble aura was something that few people could match. Not only were the people in the city curious about who they were, but they were also curious. Even some cultivators were secretly guessing. Some of them recognized the smiling chubby girl, Yang Xiao, and began to discuss in low voices. "Isn't that the second young miss of the Yang family? Who are the people beside her? They're so handsome. They look like they're the children of an influential family. Their auras are incomparable to ours. They don't look like them." Another old man also shook his head and whispered, "That man and woman in front don't have the temperament of an aristocratic family's descendant. This old man has lived for many years and has a good eye for people. The man and woman in front are definitely not ordinary. The two behind them look like attendants, but the white-clothed youth has an aura similar to that of an influential family's young master. The black-clothed woman is a bit cold. You don't need to get close to her to know that she's cold. She's not someone to be trifled with." Hearing the old man's words, the people who were whispering to each other quieted down and stopped talking. Their gazes followed the few people until they were blocked by the people on the street. Then, they heard the old man's voice again. "Our 100 Rivers city is the busiest and most famous of the several dozen cities in this area. It's also close to the magnificent immortal sect. It's normal for powerful people from other places to come to our city. There's no need to make a fuss." As the old man spoke, he shook his head and hummed a tune as he walked away. Chapter 1939. Feng Zhou, who was talking to Xianyuan Mose, heard Yang Xiao's words and looked in the direction she was pointing at. With just a glance, she shook her head, not good. This shop had 3 floors, but it was located at the corner of the main street. The facade was not straight and was not the shop she wanted. So it's like this. Then let's take a look. There are some in front, but none of them are 3 floors high. This area is considered a bustling area. Every 3 to 4 floors high pavilion is the property of the various large families in the city. They won't sell or rent them. Feng Zhou nodded and followed her forward. They looked at all the shops in this bustling area. Although there were a few suitable ones, as Yang Xiao said, those were the property of the large families and would not be seated. You don't have to choose a place in this bustling area, Xianyuan Mose said from the side. He looked at Feng Zhou and said slowly, with your ability, even if it's in the corner, people will come looking for you. Hearing this, Feng Zhou smiled slightly, and I think so too. Since we can't find one in this area, let's look at other places. Hearing the two's words, Yang Xiao's eyes turned and said, Sister Feng, how about this? I'll take you to look at one of my houses. I think that place is quite good. It's just that it's not a bustling area and there aren't many people. If you like it, you can discuss it with my father. He's very easy to talk to. Fatty Yang. You still have the face to come out. As they were talking, they suddenly heard a coquettish voice. They looked up and saw a woman in luxurious clothes accompanied by 2 servant girls. She was looking at Yang Xiao with contempt. Yang Xiao heard this familiar voice and rolled her eyes. Sister Feng, let's go. She was too lazy to care about that golden peacock. Fatty Yang, I heard that young Master Wan ran away from the marriage. That's right, you're so fat and ugly. Who would dare to marry you? The woman in luxurious clothes held a small fan in her hand and gently fanned herself. She didn't forget to mock Yang Xiao. Feng Zhou and the others did not move. They did not intervene or interrupt. They just watched quietly. Yang Xiao originally didn't want to argue with her, but in front of Lang Hua's brother, who she liked, she couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. She was fat, but she wasn't ugly. Because of her embarrassment, she, who had a straightforward personality, turned around and threw a punch. Because the woman in luxurious clothes was close, Yang Xiao turned around and threw a punch. This unexpected punch caused the woman in luxurious clothes to cry out in surprise. She wanted to dodge, but it was too late. Bang! Hiss! Miss! For a time, there was a heavy bang, a sharp and miserable shriek, and the 2 maidservants cried out at the same time. Not only were the woman in luxurious clothes and the others stunned by this unexpected scene, even Feng Zhou and the others were slightly stunned as well. Golden Peacock, how dare you call me ugly? See if I don't beat you until you're ugly. Yang Xiao angrily glared with a pair of round eyes. She rolled up her sleeves and looked at the woman in luxurious clothes whose eyes were swollen from her punch. She was about to charge forward again, but this time, one of the 2 servant girls hurriedly went forward to block her, while the other pulled her young miss back. Chapter 1940. After forcefully pushing aside the servant girl, the woman in luxurious clothes rushed forward and began to wrestle with Yang Xiao. She cursed and pulled at Yang Xiao's hair. Feng Zhou and the others were stunned when they saw this scene. They were completely like shrews fighting. Weren't these 2 daughters of aristocratic families? How could they be so fierce when they fought? Seeing that quite a few people had gathered around to watch the show, Feng Zhou ordered, separate them. Lang Hua and Lang Shuang, who were standing behind him, immediately stepped forward. Leng Hua pulled Yang Xiao back. Miss Xiao stop fighting. Ling Shuang pulled away the woman in luxurious clothes and pushed her to the two servant girls. He glanced at them coldly. Watch her. Yang Xiao glared angrily. She saw that the new dress she had specially put on was wrinkled, and the new hairstyle she had carefully combed for a long time was messed up. She even made a fool of herself in front of elder sister Feng and elder brother Lang Hua. She couldn't help but bite her lower lip, and her eyes gradually turned red. Miss Xiao, are you hurt? Lang Hua asked gently when he saw that the young lady had her head lowered and looked like she was about to cry. Elder brother Lang Hua, she pulled my hair. She messed up my hairstyle and wrinkled my new clothes. Yang Xiao pursed her lips. The more she thought about it, the more wronged she felt. She wanted to see them beautifully, but now she had become like this. Would elder brother Lang Hua also think that she was fat and ugly? Thinking of this, she became even sadder. Large teardrops the size of beads fell down her face. Hearing this, Lang Hua smiled gently. It's fine. We'll find a place in front to comb our hair. His gaze turned and landed on her wrist. The skin on the back of her hand had been scratched, and a few drops of blood were seeping out. The back of your hand is bleeding. Let me bandage it for you. As he spoke, he took out a medicinal powder and a piece of cloth. After applying the medicine, he wrapped up the back of the hand. His movements were slow and gentle, and there was a gentle smile on his face. Yang Xiao couldn't help but be stunned. Even the young woman in luxurious clothes who was supported by two servant girls gritted her teeth in anger when she saw this scene. She was both furious and jealous. Fatty Yang was so fat and ugly, so why was this handsome young man so gentle to her? Damn it! Xianyuan Mose and Feng Jiu watched from the side. The former was expressionless, while the latter was full of smiles. She looked at the two of them and thought to herself, this Yang-er's features are very exquisite. He's just a little chubby. If he slimmed down, he'd definitely be a beauty. Most importantly, she liked this Yang-er's personality no matter how she looked at him. Lang Hua watched his brother bandage Yang Xiao-er's wound. His eyes flashed, but he didn't say anything. He quietly stood behind Fengjiu. After tying the cloth into a beautiful knot, Lang Hua smiled gently. It's done. He withdrew his hand and looked at the young woman in luxurious clothes. With a gentle smile, he said, Miss, your eyes are a bit red and swollen. It's better if you go home and apply some medicine to reduce the swelling. The young woman in luxurious clothes was originally a bit angry, but when she saw the beautiful young man smile at her, she was stunned. She didn't react for a moment, and by the time she reacted, she saw that they had already left. Young miss, young miss. The servant girl on the side carefully called out. Chapter 1941. Miss, you should go back and apply some medicine. Your eyes. The servant girl lowered her head, not daring to look up. The woman in luxurious clothes bit her lip and looked in the direction they left. She stomped her feet, then covered her eyes and turned to leave. On the other side, Fengjiu and the others found a private room in a tea house to rest. Yang Xiao tidied up her hair and clothes and walked out after a while. Big sister Feng, I'm done. Yang Xiao walked out with her head lowered. Fengjiu looked over and saw that she had braided her hair into two simple braids. It looked playful, simple, and very cute. He nodded and praised, you look very good like this. Yang Xiao lowered her head and said in a small voice, but other than father, no one said I looked good. They all said I was fat and scolded me. No, your facial features are very delicate. You're cute when you're fat. If you can slim down, you'll definitely be very beautiful. Fengjiu said with a smile. He supported his chin with one hand and glanced at Lang Hua beside him. He asked with a smile, Lang Hua, don't you think so? Lang Hua was slightly startled, then nodded with a smile, yes, Miss Xiao, is very cute. Young Xiao's face turned red when she heard this. For a moment she was overjoyed, but also a little embarrassed. She didn't know what she was thinking, but she instinctively said, Lang Hua Gij is also very handsome. Lang Hua smiled gently and quietly stood to the side. Xiao, come and have a cup of tea. Fengjiu smiled and gestured for her to sit across from him. Young Xiao glanced at Xianyuan Mose, who was sitting next to Fengjiu. Only then did she sit down at the table and pick up the tea in front of her to drink. They sat in the tea house for a while before getting up and leaving. They followed Yang Xiao to the place she told them about. Big Sister Feng, this is the west side of the city. Although there are people here, there aren't as many people as there were before. But let me tell you, my house is in the best location here. She walked in front with light steps as she introduced the place to Fengjiu and the others. She pointed at the highest floor in front of them and said, Sister Feng, look, it's there. Fengjiu and the others looked ahead and saw a 3.5-story building in the distance. It could be said that if one stood on the second floor of the building and looked out, they would be able to see everything around them. As he walked forward, Fengjiu saw that he was about to reach the other side, but it took him quite some time to reach the other side. When he reached the other side, Fengjiu was slightly surprised. After looking around, his gaze fell on the floor. Hee. Young Xiao smiled embarrassedly. Actually, my house is not bad. It's just that. Her voice became softer and softer as she spoke, and she was a little embarrassed. Xianyuan Mose glanced indifferently. The 3.5-story building did look good from the outside, but this place was a little too remote. This place was not on the upper part of the city, but rather in the inner area. The shops on the left, right, and in front of the building were all empty. It could be said that there was no one else here other than the few of them. There's no one walking around here, not even hawkers. Master, isn't this place a little too remote? Lang Hua looked at Fengjiu and asked. Chapter 1942. The shops on these two streets belong to my family. However, a family that has always been at odds with my family is now at odds with my family. The street in front of us is blocked. If you want to enter these two streets, you have to take a long detour. Therefore, many people are unwilling to come here. The business here can't continue either. My family's shops have been empty since then. Young Xiao said, then quickly added, Sister Feng, this building is not bad, and behind it is Jade Wave Lake, the scenery is beautiful. Can we go in and take a look? Fengjiu looked at the building and asked. Of course. My family's people are guarding this place, I'll bring you there. She said with a smile, then quickly walked in. Not long after, an old man appeared behind her. Sister Feng, come in quickly. Young Xiao stood there and waved. The old man next to him stood respectfully to the side, secretly sizing up Fengjiu and the others. Uncle Yang, I'll bring them up. You go do your thing. Young Xiao said to the old man. Yes, second Mississippi, the old man replied, then bowed to Fengjiu and the others before leaving. Sister Feng, look, this is the first floor, it's very spacious. Other than the front, there's also a backyard. The backyard is very big, and it's separated. Go upstairs and take a look, I'll bring you to the backyard later. Yang Xiao said in front, then brought them to the second floor, then the third floor, and finally the small attic. Fengjiu originally thought that the building was well built from the outside, but after seeing the structure inside, she was even more satisfied. It's not bad inside, right? She looked at Xianyuan Mose beside her and asked. Yes, it's not bad. He replied, then looked at Jade Wave Lake behind them. The mesmerizing scenery entered his eyes. It was indeed not bad. Fengjiu heard and smiled, then looked at Jade Wave Lake. Finally, she went to the first floor and looked at the backyard, then decided, let's do it here. She looked at Yang Xiao, I want to buy this place, I'll ask Linghua to go back with you and talk to your father. Yang Xiao was stunned when he heard this. He asked in a daze, Sister Feng, are you really going to buy this place? Yes. But although this place is very good, but I'm afraid that if you do business here, you will go bankrupt. She said with some worry. Fengjiu chuckled. How could that be? I've never done a business that went bankrupt before. Alright, don't worry. I think I like this place. As he spoke, he looked at Linghua. Go with her to the Yang family and complete the paperwork. Okay, Linghua responded and said to Yang Xiao, Miss Xiao, can we go now? So soon. Yang Xiao, was slightly stunned. He hesitated for a moment before asking, Sister Feng, aren't you going to reconsider? No need. She smiled and shook her head. That's it. Take care of the paperwork. I can get someone to change it right away. Seeing this, Yang Xiao had no choice but to bring Linghua to her house first. Let's go buy some other things. Fengjiu smiled and said, since we've decided on the place, we can start preparing. Xianyuan Mose's lips curled, then he held her hand and walked out. He never doubted her decisions. If she said it was good, then it must be good. Even if it wasn't, she must have a way. Noon, at the Yang family house. Chapter 1943. Seeing her father glaring at Linghua with a dark expression, Yang Xiao, tugged at his clothes. Father, big brother Linghua came to our house because he wanted to talk to you about something. Linghua smiled slightly and stepped forward to bow. Greetings, Patriarch Yang. I've taken the liberty of coming here today and have disturbed you. Patriarch Yang turned around and sat on the main seat, then asked, why have you come to my Yang estate? He glanced at Linghua, then picked up his teacup and took a sip of tea. Yang Xiao, was about to speak, but Linghua gestured for her to stop. Patriarch Yang didn't invite him to sit, and he didn't sit either. Instead, he stood in the middle of the hall and said warmly, my master wants to buy the 3.5-story building in Shi City from Patriarch Yang. Patriarch Yang choked on his tea when he heard this. He put down the teacup and coughed a few times. After he calmed himself down, he raised his voice and asked, what did you say? Your master wants to buy the building in my city. That's right. Linghua nodded. Patriarch Yang was a little surprised, but he didn't immediately respond. Instead, he pondered for a moment before carefully sizing up the young man in front of him. He could be called a young man, but he could also be called a young man. He looked to be around 17 or 18 years old. His white clothes were very simple, and his temperament was very gentle. His appearance was also very outstanding. A man like this was just a servant. After all, his temperament was neither haughty nor humble. Even the young masters of ordinary aristocratic families couldn't compare to him. To be able to teach such a servant, what kind of outstanding person was his master? have you seen the building in Shi City? He asked. We've seen it, Leng Hua replied warmly. Is your master satisfied? After asking this question, Patriarch Yang felt that it was a useless question. If he wasn't satisfied, why would he want to buy that building from him? Thus, he coughed lightly and asked again, what does your master plan to do with that building? Leng Hua smiled gently and said, Patriarch Yang, today I am here on my master's orders to discuss business with Patriarch Yang. If Patriarch Yang is curious, after you sell that place to us, you can visit it again soon. You will naturally find out what kind of business my master does. As for now, it is really inconvenient for me to disclose it. Hearing this, Patriarch Yang glanced at Leng Hua and paused for a moment before saying, my place isn't cheap. Patriarch Yang is a character from Hundred River City, so he won't raise the price on the spot and quote an unreasonable price, Leng Hua said warmly, seemingly not worried that Yang Kai would quote too high a price. Hearing this, Patriarch Yang's eyes flashed. He took a deep look at Leng Hua before calling out, housekeeper. Patriarch. An old man walked in and bowed respectfully. Go and bring me the title deed of the West Market building. Patriarch Yang ordered. Hearing this, Yang Shao was very happy. But when he saw that Leng Hua was still standing, he couldn't help but tug at his father's hand to give him a hint. Patriarch Yang saw this, but only snorted softly and didn't invite him to sit. Leng Hua didn't mind. After dealing with this matter, he still had to report back to his master. Not long after, the old housekeeper brought the title deed. Patriarch Yang and Leng Hua went through the remaining procedures in the hall. After everything was settled, Leng Hua cupped his hands and said, I will take my leave first. Patriarch Yang, please. Chapter 1944. It would have been better if she had liked a young master from an influential family, or if she had taken a fancy to this youth's master, that would have been fine. However, she had taken a fancy to a servant. How could he be happy about this? Older brother Leng Hua, I'll send you off. Yang Shao quickly shouted as he followed after him. When they arrived outside the manor, Yang Shao looked at him apologetically. Older brother Leng Hua, don't be angry at my father. He's actually a pretty good person. I just don't know what's gotten into him these past few days. He's been acting a bit strange. Hearing this, Leng Hua smiled, it's fine. Master Yang sold the building to us so quickly, and at a normal market price. From this, it can be seen that he is an upright and principled person. Seeing that he was not unhappy, Yang Shao relaxed. Older brother Leng Hua, it's good that you're not angry. Then tell older sister Feng that I'll go find her tomorrow to play. Okay, then I'll be leaving first. You can go back. Leng Hua said, then turned and left. On the other side, Feng Zhou, Xianyuan Mose, and Leng Shuang strolled around the streets before returning to the Feng Manor in the evening. Leng Hua had already returned to the manor. Master, this is the deed for the building. Leng Hua handed the deed to Feng Zhou. Feng Zhou took it and glanced at it, then handed it to him, just take it. Tomorrow, I'll draw up a design. Find someone to finish the renovation as soon as possible. Yes. Leng Hua replied, then put the deed away. Xianyuan Mose returned to the Ling Manor. That night, Feng Zhou personally drew up a design. The next day, he handed it to Leng Hua, who began to renovate it. Over the next few days, Feng Zhou asked Leng Hua to collect some spiritual herbs while concocting potions. He was so busy that not even his shadow could be seen. As for Xianyuan Mose, he did not go to the Ling residence for the past few days. Instead, he stayed in the Feng Manor. When Feng Zhou was mixing medicine in the courtyard, he would sit to the side and quietly watch. When she wanted to go out, he would accompany her. He hadn't seen Xianyuan for a few days. In the Ling residence, Ji Shui Immortal Monarch was getting a little anxious from waiting. He looked at Hui Lang, who was not far away, and asked, "Why is your master nowhere to be seen? What is he busy with? Please forgive us, Immortal Monarch. As subordinates, we would never dare to ask about things that our master did not mention." Hui Lang lowered his head as he spoke. He didn't tell him that his master had been busy with the ghost doctor these few days. Ji Shui Immortal Monarch glanced at him and furrowed his brows. He clasped his hands and said, "Let me know when your master comes back." After saying this, he turned around and returned to the courtyard. On the other side, Fengjiu was in the middle of putting the finished medicine into her space. She let out a light sigh. After working for a few days, there's finally some results. These things should be almost done. I wonder how the renovations are going. There are a lot of people who haven't eaten lunch yet. We'll go take a look after we eat. Xianyuan stood up and extended his hand to her. Okay. Let's go eat outside. She replied with a smile and walked out with him. These days, not only had she been busy, but the 8 Phoenix Guards had also been busy expanding their influence in the surrounding towns. Du Fan and Leng Hua had taken care of the renovations, while Leng Hua had been watching over the manor. They had used a few days to prepare everything that needed to be prepared. Now, they just had to wait for the renovations to be completed before opening for business. You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.